Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. I've been playing a lot of War Thunder Naval recently, as I'm sure many of you have, at least relatively speaking, in order to complete various challenges for Battle Pass, as this seems to be Gaijin's attempt to, well, quite frankly, force people to play Naval. Now, I don't hate Naval and have actually had a fair amount of matches in the past, getting up to 5.3 BR with Germany before buying any German premium ships. And this was back when Blue Water and Coastal Navy ships were in one tech tree. I've actually had a good time with Naval in general, and I eventually purchased the Prince Eugen and I absolutely love it. I will be making a review for the Prince Eugen soon, but that's not the point of this video. War Thunder Naval matches are probably the only aspect of War Thunder that is less popular and arguably less polished than its wargaming counterpart and competitor, World of Warships, of which seems to be much more popular than Naval mode in War Thunder. In fact, a recent poll that I ran on my channel showed that of over 1,600 respondents, only 2% preferred Naval over ground forces or aviation in War Thunder. That's only around 30 to 35 people out of a decently sized sample group. This said, whereas ground forces and aviation in War Thunder have, to my knowledge, taken the market share over World of Tanks and World of Warplanes, one possibly cannot say the same for Naval versus World of Warships, though these numbers are difficult to ascertain due to the fact that War Thunder Naval is not a standalone game, whereas World of Warships is. Back to the point of this video, however. This video will be an attempt to explain why War Thunder Naval is so unpopular compared to the rest of the War Thunder game types, and will hopefully grant some ideas for how to help fix it. So this said, I'll start off with what I think the main issues are and then go into detail about them and some ideas that I've both seen and thought of myself to help fix them. So first, clearly matches are way too long and RP rewards are far too small, creating a low reward for a substantial time investment, oftentimes over 25 minutes per match. Additionally, despite the low RP rewards, upper tier ships are extremely expensive RP wise. I understand that there are top tier ships, but they won't be that way forever. As such, Gaijin should decrease RP required for upper BR ships by some degree, and they'll immediately have more people starting to play Naval. This was always a big thing keeping me from getting into it. Why take 5 to 10 hours of matches to grind a single ship with few differences from the ship before on the tech tree, when I could just take 1 to 3 hours to grind a tank in another game mode with lower queue times? There is, as of the making of this video as well, an artificial RP barrier that totally slows all progress. Perhaps it's the slower pace of naval combat, but I do not receive nearly the same RP per minute that I would in ground or air, and I'll be getting into those numbers in detail later. Another major issue is that Gaijin has poorly explained the mechanics of naval warfare and how they work in-game. Because many ships of increasing BR seem to have basically the same loadout as the previous ship on the tech tree, with maybe some more secondary armaments, crew, and maybe slightly more armor, I feel that Gaijin should do more to clearly show the differences from ship to ship. For example, the German light cruiser Nuremberg has a ridiculously good rate of fire, but you wouldn't know it because it's not advertised on the stat sheet. This makes people think, what's the point when researching new ships? They probably feel that they're getting the same ship or just a slight upgrade in exchange for a ridiculously long grind, when you could grind a similar BR plane or tank far quicker. To the point with the Nuremberg, you would likely have no idea that the Nuremberg can have a reload speed of 5 seconds for its main cannons, while the Leipzig, its predecessor on the tech tree with literally the same cannons and the same number of cannons, has a 50% worse reload speed at a total of 7.5 seconds. That is an absolutely huge difference, and you wouldn't know it unless you went to unusual lengths to find it out. Understandably, most people will not go to those lengths because Gaijin has not yet made Naval interesting enough where people actively want to learn about it. Besides, many people don't even know that you can go into X-ray and hover over a turret or cannon in Naval to find out its approximate fire rate because it's not on the stat sheet. Most people don't go to the wiki either, especially not for Naval. This is especially important in what is currently top tier Naval because having a faster firing set of cannons on a lightly armored warship, even if it has the same cannon size as the previous ship, is extremely important. When you get 1 or 2 shot in your light cruiser by heavy cruisers or battleships, it helps to be able to get as many shots in as possible, whereas having a few extra dozen crew or a few millimeters more of armor oftentimes means next to nothing in those situations. Now let's get into some ways to help fix War Thunder's naval warfare, or at least help to improve them. And some people say to make maps bigger, and I do, at least to a point, agree with that, and it also improve the layout of maps, but I'd say to at least start enemies a little bit closer, at least in blue water and upper tier, like maybe 5 to 10% closer at very most. Now coastal matches are, at their heart, much quicker because they're basically played like low BR arcade ground matches with tons of easy to kill, fast moving vehicles with some people that are just really good and seal club everyone who has no idea what they're doing. Now, I'm not proposing to implement a low BR like setting in blue water matches, but I do believe that bringing people closer at the start of those matches will do much to hasten the matches and make them more action packed, as well as helping to solve the RP issue where, per minute, we receive substantially less RP per minute than playing any other standard game mode outside of maybe Assault Air or Assault Ground Arcade. Now, one could argue that War Thunder Naval, if it were for some reason to be released as a standalone game such as how World of Warships is, it could be looked at as an alpha or even a beta type game, with so few vehicles, vehicle types, and weapons being usable at the current stage. There are no submarines, carriers, missile cruisers, airplane catapults for larger ships, no radar for ships, sonar, etc. I feel that focusing on these features for a patch or two would bring a massive influx of people into naval matches. Right now, unless you get a torpedo kill, if you get stuck in an up tier where you're in a destroyer and you're facing battleships and heavy cruisers, you will die. This is in contrast to ground forces, for example, where light tanks are still very usable in matches with heavy tanks or main battle tanks. Once you bring in new ship types such as submarines, you will see a huge amount of excitement for naval. I know subs are eventually coming, as Gaijin did have an event in October and November of 2020 showcasing how they would work in game. I'm not saying to rush development, but subs should be a big priority for the next patch or two, even before carriers. Now, for a minor thing to at least draw people to Naval, I feel that Gaijin could entice people by spicing up ship camos. Currently, they're all pretty much just variations of deforming camo, with nothing fictional or semi-historical. I feel that by adding these, it would go some way towards attracting at least a few more players, and I get it, there are custom user-made skins, but people want to show off their skins to other people in-game, and those custom user-made skins are not visible to anyone but you. Essentially, what we currently have in-game are just mechanics that are present in other game modes, but scaled up and on the platform of ships. And what I mean by this is that we have naval cannons, for example, and these have been present in-game since at very least ground forces, or at the very earliest from the very start of War Thunder, depending on how you see it. And when I say naval cannons, I mean just cannons in general. Again, they're scaled up to be on ships. Additionally, we have torpedoes, but this weapon has also been in game since at least the start of War Thunder or very shortly thereafter. The only real things that are new to naval are, and correct me if I'm wrong, depth charges and naval mines, and these have very few applications, at least right now, and they've both been introduced to the game very recently. This, as stated before in the video, is an issue and it could be solved with new naval-specific weaponry or new ways to control or use what is already in naval matches. Imagine peering down what would have looked like the actual gun sights, or however you might want to consider it, of the Bismarck when that finally comes out. That would be so rad. It seems like Gaijin just wants us to enjoy naval without putting in the work to improve it. Certainly it is playable and fairly smooth, has fun ships, but it seems like for now they're just scaling up the vehicles without adding anything foundational. For example, with each patch, though I do certainly appreciate it, we're just getting new battleships for the most part. These are basically just larger, more heavily armored and armed versions of what's already in game. Of course, I do realize that with larger vehicles, especially ships, it takes much more time to accurately model and detail them to get it right, so I do appreciate all the hard work and effort on the part of Gaijin. The ships are modeled beautifully in game. This said, however, we are getting ships that are being added while keeping the grind for naval at such a mind-numbingly slow pace that it's just absolutely discouraging to even want to play, especially when you get towards 5.0 or higher BR. I remember months ago I had the Emden and the Köln working up to the Nuremberg, and each match would easily take 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer, while providing 4,000 to 6,000 RP, all while I had premium and typically did fairly well, being normally in the top third of my team. It's like trying to get blood from a stone. To make matters worse is when you lose that same match that you invested so much time and effort into and get a fraction of the rewards that you would if you had won. And oftentimes the margin of victory is so razor thin that it could literally rely on which team has faster ships or gets off the last few shots in a match. In any other game mode, be it arcade or realistic, ground or air, I can tell you that in a 10 to 15 minute match, I will typically make substantially more silver lines and earn more RP. Let's just say that, for example, I play arcade air and gain 10,000 RP in a 15-minute match, which is not too unusual for me. In a 30-minute match of Naval, I might make 5,000 to 6,000 RP. Huge downgrade in the amount of RP I get for a much higher use of time. A 5.7 BR ship like the Graf Spee costs 220,000 RP, while the Admiral Hipper costs 270,000. While I do fully expect these RP prices to decrease as more ships are added in-game, the cost of higher BR ships is still ludicrous, as it places a huge barrier between the people who actually want to progress in Naval and the ships that they're most excited to buy. Again, I fully understand that these are top tier ships as of the making of this video, and RP prices will likely decrease by a decent margin in the coming months, but having them so artificially high, especially with such low RP earned per minute of playtime, makes it so that many people won't even want to consider playing Naval until more ships and weapons are added. Why put in 8 to 12 hours of gameplay for a ship now, especially with a somewhat unfinished game mode, when I could wait until next year or later to play in a more finished game mode while taking 4 to 6 hours at max to earn that same ship? That to me has been the biggest reason why I mainly stopped playing Naval months ago. It just felt like I was beating my head into a wall. You do well in a match, you win, and you get like 3% of the needed RP for a ship that feels basically the same and has the same stats more or less as the previous ship that you also spent hours working on. To juxtapose briefly, a 5.7 BR tank such as the 76mm M4A3 for Japan costs 46,000 RP. That's not even 1/5 of the same BR Admiral Hipper, and you can bet that per minute played of ground forces that you are receiving far more RP than Naval. It's basically a double whammy. I wouldn't have such an issue with the overly high RP requirements of currently near top BR ships, even though they will soon be totally outdated once new ships and weapons are introduced. Again, I understand that top BR vehicles, regardless of if they are 10.7 or 6.0 or whatever, will have a much higher RP cost than vehicles lower than it because they represent the top of the top and are, by their nature, the most exclusive and should be more difficult to maintain, or better said, obtain. I get that. My problem is that with these high RP costs Gaijin has, through current Naval gameplay and possibly through other means, I'm not really sure, slashed how much RP you will gain per minute in any given match, making these top tier Naval ships much more unobtainable than even a top tier tank or aircraft. In a recent top tier air arcade match that I played, I earned 16,628 RP in total in a match totaling 9 minutes and 48 seconds. In this match, I did not use any premium vehicles, though I do have premium time. In the Naval match I played immediately thereafter, in which I destroyed 7 player ships and did nearly 13,000 damage, mostly all with the Prinz Eugen, a German premium heavy cruiser, I earned 16,523 RP in 23.5 minutes. That is nearly the same RP earned, but it took nearly 2.5 times as long to achieve it. And I used a premium ship to do the vast majority of it. Even in a match that took 11.5 minutes and in which I only performed decently in Air Arcade, I earned 11,938 RP in that time period, and without premium vehicle in that lineup. If I were to scale that type of performance up to the time it took me to complete my recent Blue Water Navy match that, again, uses a premium ship, I'd earn nearly 25,000 RP in that same time that it took me to complete the 23.5 minute Naval match. If I were to scale up my best Air Arcade match of the night to match how long that Naval match took, I would have earned over 40,000 RP, and this is without boosters, but again with premium time. Again, those air matches did not include me playing any premiums. Interestingly, even though I did very well in that Naval match, destroying 7 enemy player ships and dealing nearly 13,000 points of damage, I only had a score of 1,772, whereas 5 kills and 5 assists in my my lesser Air Arcade match gave me 2310 score. This seems fairly equal until you consider score per minute. To this point, I gained over 200 score per minute in my lesser Air Arcade match, whereas in the Naval match, I only earned 75.4 score per minute. That means that, assuming score translates roughly in each game mode to the same amount of RP, playing Naval is less than half as efficient per minute when compared to other game modes, such as even Air Arcade, at least for me. Of course, this will fluctuate per person, but I doubt anyone will ever have it where their Naval matches are more efficient per minute than any air or ground matches that they play, at least as of the making of this video. This means that for the 270,000 RP Admiral Hipper Heavy Cruiser, I would need 16.3 of those excellent matches that I had, all of which were wins, where I earned 16,523 RP in each match. Unfortunately, if you include the losses, of which generate far less RP, and the matches where you get torpedoed and die immediately, and every other thing that could happen, you're looking at far longer to research it in reality. Even if I did miraculously have some of those awesome matches all in a row, it would take me 6.4 hours of playing time straight to unlock the Admiral Hipper. Whereas if I wanted to unlock the 5.7 BR J2M5 Raiden for the Japanese Air Tech Tree, of which costs 71,000 RP, it would take me just 6 wins where I have 5 kills and 5 assists in Air Arcade, giving me a total of 11,938 RP in each of those matches, as I mentioned before, again that I earned in a recent match. If all of those were wins and all took the same 11.5 minutes as that one Air Arcade match I mentioned before, you're looking at a total of 1 hour and 9 minutes of gameplay to earn that J2M5 Raiden. It takes nearly 6 times longer, assuming similar stats to mine, to earn the Admiral Hipper compared to the J2M5. Between the 37.5% score per minute efficiency, of which again was based on a winning match, so it could actually be substantially lower, huge RP discrepancy between similar BR ships and other vehicles from 5.7 BR onwards, and the time it takes per match, War Thunder Naval seems like a huge time waster that will ultimately take you far longer to earn a single vehicle in Naval than it would in any other type of gameplay, be it air or ground. Moreover, once you spend a long time researching a single ship, you get to purchase that new ship, and you might be lucky if it has bigger or more cannons than your previous ship. While one ship or another may have slightly better AA or slightly better top speed, for example, it might also lack torpedoes, which could, to you, make it a much lesser ship than the one that came previously in the tech tree, even though it took hours more to obtain than an equivalent BR plane or tank. Whereas upgrades are fairly obvious with each successive plane or tank in the tech tree, the lines are much more blurry in Naval. Not only this, but much of the RP that you gain in Naval matches due to the inclusion of planes goes towards Air Tech Tree RP, making it so that you gain even less RP towards ships than you might think, which, when combined with the seemingly small upgrades between some ships, is extremely discouraging for people trying to get into Naval. Now, with all that out of the way, all the negativity, I want to go over what I love about Naval, and there's tons to love. I'm just offering suggestions for how to improve it, so don't think that I hate it, because I really do like Naval and War Thunder. Personally, for example, I love how I can get into the Prinz Eugen and go into battle. The historical aspect of Naval is arguably much greater than in ground forces or air, simply because unlike in ground forces or air, you can get into a named vehicle such as, again, the Prinz Eugen, or in the future, the Bismarck or USS Alaska, and fight. This is opposed to ground forces or air, where for the most part, you just get into a nameless vehicle like a T-34 or Sherman. Of course, there are exceptions, but the historical attachment on a ship-to-ship basis in Naval, for me at least, is one of the absolute coolest things about all of War Thunder, not even just considering Naval alone. Additionally, the integration between air and Naval, I feel, works very well, and makes for a challenge to approach higher BR ships when flying planes. I also love getting into a new ship, especially with larger cannons, and seeing the huge impact that it has on damage when facing enemies, or how when using a heavy cruiser, most early light cruisers or destroyers will be able to not really deal much damage to you unless they use armor-piercing shells. Also, at least Gaijin is not nearly as money-grubbing as Wargaming, as Wargaming is currently selling a $200, you heard it right, $200 Tier 9 out of 10 tiers ship bundle. It's ridiculous. Worse yet, that's considered a sale, as that same ship bundle would normally cost $268. Look, I truly like Naval and War Thunder, and while it's not my most played mode, it's not because it's a bad mode. It's just because the matches take too long for the RP that they yield. If they took more RP or took a shorter amount of time, I'd be playing Naval all the time. While it is still basically in its infancy or just beyond that as a game mode, it is still extremely playable and very fun, with much promise for the future. And we must recognize that War Thunder Naval, while it does certainly have its faults, will be improved upon dramatically, with likely many of the improvements that I mentioned before, from subs to even new camo options, likely coming either this year or early in 2022. Gaijin wants Naval to succeed, and I know it will. It will take time and some tweaking, but I have full faith that they will make it undeniably better than it is now and turn it into a viable third game mode for many players who won't even consider playing it at the current moment. But that all said, this was an extremely long video, so thanks so much for watching, guys. It was much longer than I ever expected to make, but I feel like I went through everything and then some. Let me know in the comments below what you think. As always, please consider subscribing in order to support my channel. Either way, thanks again, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.